Now you don't know what the hell to do, do you?
Hey! We're recording the podcast! Shut up!
Good morning to you, wherever you are, because it is Morning Summer for January 11th, 2024. My name is Bernie Burns. With me right over there, recently approved by the SEC, Ashley. How are you doing?
Yeah, oh my God, all my Satoshis in a row.
We're going to talk a little bit about the Bitcoin ETF that was approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission of the United States of America. A little bit later
I
today.
have so many questions, but we'll get to it.
I caught some grief from some of my friends about talking about the roads in Austin yesterday, but I was reminded by a friend of mine, Xander, who he reminded me that he sold his motorcycle just recently because the roads in Austin are so bad. He just didn't want to ride a motorcycle there
Wow.
anymore. And I was like, I'd forgotten about that. Yeah. Xander's he is part of my Sea of Thieves crew, and he's also if you're on the Morning Somewhere subreddit, we should talk about that probably.
We probably should. I don't think we've mentioned it so far.
He's a mod on the subreddit there as well.
So I guess to mention it, we have a subreddit. It's called Morning Somewhere.
You look nervous talking about Reddit.
No, it's actually it's a really good community, and there's been a lot of good discussions so far. We found out via the subreddit that one of the people that listens to the show worked on the rocket launch that we talked
Vulcan
about.
rocket,
So,
yeah.
the Vulcan rocket. So that's really exciting.
That is really cool.
I've no pressure on us to get our astrophysics or rocket science correct at all.
Yeah, so if Reddit's your thing and you want to discuss more topics, maybe you can visit the Morning Somewhere subreddit. And for most of our socials everywhere, it's usually at Morning Somewhere.
Yeah,
that's all.
so
So Instagram,
Threads,
Reddit, Threads. Are we using Threads?
We absolutely use Threads. I love Threads. I like the vibe on Threads. It's like Twitter without all the like negative bullshit. We are on Twitter, but it's actually that's the only place we couldn't get Morning Somewhere because there's a character limit on username.
Yeah.
So it's like Morning Some Pod. I'll double check it.
But we don't use the X one, right, at all?
I mean, it's sort of an episode feed. I'll post the same thing there as I do at Threads, just like when there's an episode up and I'll link to it.
All right, crazy stuff going on in the news today. What's the deal? Did everyone avoid doing layoffs before the holidays, and now they're just starting off 2024 with layoffs? Or what's going on?
No, but I know what you're talking about. So there a couple of different companies announced a whole bunch of layoffs. Yeah, well, a couple of big companies. Amazon just announced layoffs in the hundreds from covering both their streaming video and Twitch.
It's so weird. People don't think of Twitch as an Amazon company. They seem to get a pass on being owned by Amazon, and I'm not really sure why.
I think Amazon's done a pretty decent job of keeping themselves fairly invisible, although there are perks. Like if you have an Amazon Prime account, I think you get like one free subscription on Twitch each month that you can redeem for any channel.
Yeah,
whatever.
and you get
so it's like
rewards in that that economy now in games where you get cosmetics and things. You can unlock those things through Prime and things like that.
Yeah, so there are some integrations, but for the most part, I feel like Amazon's done a pretty good job of keeping Twitchified.
Sure.
Except for
this
all
week.
the layoffs.
Yeah.
But that's not the only thing. Google is laying off hundreds in their hardware and voice assistant teams. Unity earlier this week announced they were cutting 25% of their staff. That's like 1,800 people. But the thing is, this is just what's new. There have been so many. Last month in December, Spotify cut like 1,500 people. In November, Amazon had another round of layoffs that was 180, and I want to say that over the last year, they've actually cut thousands and thousands.
The tough thing in a situation like this, which is taking place, is that a lot of these companies that are laying people off right now, these are the places where those employees would then go look for work at those other companies. But if you look
but
up,
they're all doing layoffs.
Everybody's doing layoffs. What the hell do you do at that point?
So it's one of those things that I guess I don't understand about the economy, because we keep getting these reports like, unemployment is really, really low. And I don't understand how it's this low when everyone is laying off a ton of people because they all, I guess, hired a bunch of people during the pandemic and now they're laying them all back off. And yet somehow the unemployment's low because those people aren't applying for new jobs?
Well, unemployment is a measurement of people who are looking for work and then finding or not finding jobs. It's not just people who aren't working. So they have to, at least in America, they have to be actively looking for a job and not finding one to count as being unemployed.
I see.
But I'm with you. When I look at all the news about the economy, it's all stock market's great. They just approved a Bitcoin ETF. We're achieving a soft landing. And isn't that fantastic? And how did they thread this needle? Meanwhile, when you go on social media and you talk to people, it's like, can't afford rent, don't have a job. Minimum wage hasn't changed since 2009 was the last minimum wage increase, federal one in the U.S.
Yeah, let's see. The last federal wage increase was 2009, and it's $7.25, except for non-exempt workers, which is always like restaurant workers.
Which is, it's not that different of a wage from back when I was working minimum wage decades ago.
Yeah, I mean, before that, there were raises in 2008, 2007. There was a gap to 1997. That one feels like a big one, and that's a smaller gap than we've had now by several years.
15 years is the gap now since the last minimum wage increase, right?
Yeah,
You said 2009 was the last one?
2009, yeah.
Yeah.
July 2009. That's insane. That's ridiculous.
Call it 15 years. And I think the largest gap before that was a 10-year gap around 2007-ish, I think.
There was 2009, 2008, 2007.
But the gap before that was 2007 to what?
1997.
Yeah,
so that was a 10-year gap.
That was a 10-year gap between 97 and 2007. Now we've got a 15-year gap. But you can't find another gap like that anywhere in the history of minimum wage.
And you know what's weird to me too is it seems like a lot of companies have acknowledged that $7.25, this federal minimum wage, is not a wage that they can actually offer because no one can sustain on that wage. Like McDonald's. This is local to Austin. I'm sure it varies around the country.
It all depends on what state, yeah.
But in Austin, McDonald's was what, 15 an hour, 18 an hour that they were starting people at, because just no one in Austin could hope to have a job for $7.25 an hour and have any way to actually sustain themselves.
So to put it in perspective, quick math, $7.25 an hour, 40 hours a week, a 50-week work year, because I'm assuming in America, anyone on minimum wage doesn't get paid vacation. So if they get 2 weeks off, it's on their dime. Working minimum wage, your yearly salary is $14,500. So two people doing that can make almost $30K a year doing that. And you're right. If you look at minimum wage, you'll actually see a map of the U.S. and it's different in different states. I think the minimum wage in California is $16 an hour or somewhere around there.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the state mandated minimum wage, but the federal minimum wage hasn't budged in a long time, which is crazy because I think everyone sees how much the world is about to change. And minimum wage is such an important discussion, I think, to have right now, because even if, people don't pay minimum wage and it's just this floor and it's not a relevant metric anymore, it's going to be incredibly relevant when work starts to evaporate and there's just not enough work because of automation in every possible industry, that people are just going to be sitting at home. Universal basic income is basically a minimum wage for just existing as a person. And we're going to have conversations about universal basic income very soon. People are already having the discussion, of course, but it's going to become a really, like, you might be hearing about that in presidential campaigns and things like that. Because if machines are doing all the jobs, first of all, I think it was Freddie Wong had a great tweet about that years ago. He said, how did we put ourselves in a position where machines would take all of our jobs and that's a bad thing, right? How did we get here? And it's going to be a thing where as more and more jobs start to go to machines, what do we do with people? We all have to guarantee a certain level of income. That's what universal basic income is. And how do we do it? And it's going to become a problem that we need to solve before we are proactive enough to head it off. We're just not going to do that. It's clear we're not going to head it off.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of the layoffs are going to continue as more of these jobs move over to AI, but there's not really a lot of regulation in AI yet. But I also feel like that's where funding universal basic income would come from is, companies are going to be taxed on AI. Like AI have to pay taxes, basically. What do you think?
Or there'll be like some grand event that takes place, a singularity. I mean, we don't know. This gets into, it feels like sci-fi territory. But if we get to that artificial general intelligence, that entity could figure out things really quickly on our behalf. We were talking about just now, it's starting to feel like there's two economies and two countries. And we're going to be talking in a second about like crypto and stock market and stuff like that. There really is, that does exist, the two worlds, because I always think about back during the early days of COVID, when all those senators went into a closed meeting, were briefed on what would happen to the U.S. from the COVID pandemic that was coming down the pipe. They came out of that room and told everyone, hey, everything's great. And then behind the scenes, they sold all their stocks. And nothing happened to them, as far as I know.
No, I don't think anything did, because they were like, "What? We're allowed to do that."
I believe it was Senator Bill Burr in particular who came out. Did I say Bill Burr?
Bill Burr.
But he came out. Senator Burr came out. What is his name? I got Bill Burr on the brain right now. But he came out of the meeting and just basically said, luckily, we have a framework in place that has put us in a better position, meaning the U.S., put us in a better position than any other country to respond to a public health threat like the coronavirus. However, on February 13th, he and his wife sold between $628,000 and $1.7 million worth of stock through 33 transactions. And on February 27th, Burr stated, there's one thing that I can tell you about this. It's much more aggressive in its transmission than anything we have seen in recent history.
Dickhead. That guy, by the way, that's Richard Burr.
Thank you, Richard.
Yes.
Not Bill Burr.
United States Senator from North Carolina.
But I think everyone's starting to feel this way. And I mean, the big concern, of course, with AI, the horrible dystopian sci-fi route, is that a small handful of people have access to these incredible tools. And then the rest of the people don't. And they're just, held even more in check by these huge systems that are run by a handful of people. It's a scary world that we're in. It's a scary world.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to correct it, though.
And I don't know what regulation is going to help with. I don't know, Ash. I mean,
you mean regulation of AI in general?
Well, like the EU has said, let's try to keep these rules in place and keep AI in check. And these things, they're not going to stay behind a border. An artificial intelligence isn't going to be like just, oh, that's in China and we don't have to worry about that at all. It's going to affect us.
Yeah, it's not staying there, buddy.
Yeah. So what do you do? Do you just have this race where you hope the best people make it first?
Honestly, I think the internet will probably ruin itself. There's already been like celebrity deep fake ads that go around the internet. It's like you already know that you can't, like what you're seeing isn't real. Mm-hmm. Everyone already knew that things like social media and things were often, sort of like performative. Like this is someone sharing their life, but this is not an accurate look at life. This is performance, right?
Yeah.
But now they're like, oh, I saw a headline that was like, there was a Taylor Swift deep fake ad that she was like selling artisan cookware.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, so it's like people selling you things aren't real. People telling you things aren't real.
If this kind of topic is interesting to you, by the way, there is an actual trailer that's out right now for it's in a Netflix show. It's a
Netflix show.
It's based off of a Chinese trilogy of books called The Remembrance of Earth Past. I've read it, but Three Body Problem is how people typically refer to it.
Because that's the name of the first book in the series, right?
Yeah, The Three Body Problem, which is a translation. I believe it's actually just Three Body is the name of it. There was a Chinese series that came out in January of last year that was based on it. So you could actually go watch it now. But if the concept of technology suddenly making everything not seem real, that's one of the things they deal with in that. And I listened to the audiobook of that. I said the other day on the podcast that I listen to the Martian a lot. It's my comfort thing that I listen to. But one of the things I definitely like about the Martian audiobook is it's one of the few audiobooks that I can listen to where there's not some random sex scene in it that Ashley wanders into. I'll typically be out in the garage, like working on some project, and I'll be listening to, not to spoil anything with Three Body Problem, but I'd be listening to some explanation of what the three-dimensional space looks like from someone observing it from a fourth dimensional space, and how you can see every aspect of it laid out, and how we can't possibly comprehend this as three-dimensional beings. Then Ashley, after an hour of this, Ashley walks into the garage, and as she does that, the male and female scientists decide to get together and have a sex scene. It's like, and then she showed him her boobies, and his penis went woohoo. And you always say this. Do you know what you say every time you hear that?
You listen to weird stuff.
She walks in every time and she goes, "What are you listening to?"
Because it's not just that. It's like, this is like some curse that you have. You also, you listen to a lot of Stephen King audiobooks.
I've given up on listening to Stephen King. I've given up.
Every time I walk in the room, it's like, and then she took her top off.
Oh my God. I grew up reading so much Stephen King and I love Stephen King, but man, when he gets to his sex stuff, it's just like, yeah. So it gets to live in your head forever. All right, we're supposed to talk about this Bitcoin ETF.
Yes, we did. We promised you because I have so many questions. So the SEC has just approved a Bitcoin spot ETF. First of all, what's that mean?
So that means that people can now essentially trade Bitcoin if they want to, or invest in Bitcoin, specifically Bitcoin. They can invest in it without like going out to an exchange like Coinbase or one of the other ones. And one of the things that makes this appealing for what they call retail investors is that Bitcoin, when it goes on these runs, it gets to really high prices. And right now, I think it's trading at about $47,000 at the moment, which is funny to say because I know people will listen to this in the future and they will either say, whoa, Bitcoin was 47,000 back then, or they'll be like, Bitcoin was 47,000. It's either going to be one or the other, right?
Yeah, it does go, and it swings so wildly. It was it 2022 or 2021 that it had the huge run? It ran up to 69,000, and then over the course of the next year and a half, it went down to the teens.
Yeah, but it does that before. So there's two things going on right now with Bitcoin. And this is the part of the podcast where we say,
this is not financial advice.
Right, exactly. That's what they all say.
If you can't afford to lose it, don't invest it.
They're going to talk, it's all these podcasts.
It's so risky.
They talk about financial stuff for 20 minutes and then go, but this is not financial advice, which is funny because that's exactly what the SEC did.
What? They
literally said, let me read their statement that they wrote. This is by the head of the SEC, Tom Segura. No, I'm just kidding. No, this is actually the SEC chairman is Gary Gensler, and he said, this is from a Bloomberg article, quote, while we approved the listing and trading of certain spot Bitcoin ETF shares today, we did not approve or endorse Bitcoin. That is the closest the SEC could say, but this is not financial advice.
Right. It's like they ran that through a change the words on this statement generator.
Yeah. And I don't know, everyone has really strong opinions of this kind of thing. Here's what I'll simply say. I think that crypto, one of the things I don't like about the ETF, people are really excited because there's two things going on in the Bitcoin space right now. One is this is a halving event is coming up, which is it reduces the awards that miners get for discovering a block on the blockchain. I'm trying to simplify this as much as I can. All right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to post two videos in our link dump, which you can go watch or not watch. And they're by a guy named 3 Blue 1 Brown. He's almost like, you remember CPG Gray?
Yes.
He did that great video about automation a decade ago, and all of that stuff seemingly has come true. What he does is he is able to break down how blockchain works and how SHA-256 encryption works. And I think that's really... those are big takeaways, encryption and how blockchain works. Those are big takeaways for, I think, people who invest in crypto. That's something you can learn about it. A lot of times all you hear about is money, that it's worth this and worth that. But I think the encryption part of it is something that's really captivating to me, and it's really valuable information.
Right. It's you don't just know that the thing is happening, but you get to understand how it works.
And I do think that there being an ETF will obfuscate that because it'll just be the money aspect of invest in this and kind of keeps it in that tech stock realm. The only thing I would say is if you don't want to take the time to watch these videos, just think, is it then worth your money that you spent time to earn to invest in this kind of stuff? Because I think we're about to enter the part of the cycle that has historically existed, which is called the FOMO part, when things start to take off.
Right. The run's already started.
Yeah.
You enter mid-run or late run. And then the correction happens. And there are a lot of people who got in really late on the last run when it was, in the 60,000s, and they didn't want to miss out on it going to 100. But then it didn't go to 100. It went to the teens. And a lot of people invested a lot of money that they couldn't afford to invest because they were afraid of missing out on potential money. And instead they lost mortgages. They lost everything.
Yeah, they lost their savings and to this kind of thing. So it's just like any other investment. You have to be really, really careful about it, and you should do your due diligence. But it's so easy not to do that when you're just watching numbers go up,
Yeah.
and people get super excited. I do like when people come in though into anything and they come in with fresh eyes and they make an observation. You made a great one one time.
Well, I'm very observant.
Because as Bitcoin goes up, when it does, someone's not going to go out and say, I have $46,000 to invest in a Bitcoin. One Bitcoin, please,
Yes, I'll take one Bitcoin. Thank you.
It's funny because there's other entities that are like that, like Berkshire Hathaway stock. Like, what do you think is the cost of a share of Berkshire Hathaway? It's the company that was co-founded by Warren Buffett.
$1,000.
You would be off. It is current one share of Berkshire Hathaway Incorporated. Currently, according to Yahoo Stocks, is $557,590.
That's not even a real number.
He's always had a philosophy of not splitting the stock. So as the stock has gone up, they will split it so they get two shares for then half the price. So it is more achievable for the average investor to go out and buy a share of it. He doesn't have that philosophy. He wants it to attract like-minded investors to come in, people who have a long-term view of it. So, but in Bitcoin, as it gets up, you get in the 50,000 range. People think, well, I don't have 50,000, so I'm left out of Bitcoin. They have come up with this denomination of Bitcoin called a Satoshi, named after the mysterious person who, for lack of a better term, invented Bitcoin. And a Satoshi is a 100th millionth of a Bitcoin.
Also not a real number. Why is everyone making up pretend numbers?
I think what they're doing is they realized that with only a potential of about 21 million Bitcoins that could ever possibly exist, they would go up in value so much that they would be worth tens of millions of dollars per Bitcoin. So they came up with something that would future-proof that, but now it's like way too small of a denomination.
Yeah, it's like fractions of pennies.
For instance, if Bitcoin were to go to $100,000 US, then a Satoshi would be worth $0.001. So a tenth of a cent.
That's dumb. It's also a dumb name.
It's also a dumb name, which is what I loved what you came in and said about it. You walked into the room one time when I was talking about this.
And then she took off her top.
You came in, you had such a great observation about it because you said, what the hell is a Satoshi? And some people would call them sats. And I explained what it was to you was like if it ever becomes a real viable currency, then people will trade sats and prices will be told in sats as opposed to saying, oh, the price of this candy bar is 0.0000015 Bitcoin. You can't put that anywhere. So you have to call it instead it's like 15 sats or whatever. And Ashley said, why didn't they just call it credits? And it was like the most brilliant observation to me because that's in every single sci-fi franchise. Money is called credits.
You guys, you can still do this. Rebrand. You can do it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Look, Twitter did it.
The only warning that I would give to people too is just do your due diligence. That's the only thing I would say here is do the work, do the research, see if you really believe this is something you want to put your hard-earned money behind. But it's really what is the best choice for you, and I hope you make the best one. The one thing I would say to be really careful of is later in the cycle, if Bitcoin does get out of reach, it becomes really tempting to look at other things like altcoins. And I will say my personal experience with those kinds of things is they're called altcoins up until the point they're called shit coins. Any closing thoughts, Ashley, about Bitcoin or anything like that today?
Does it have a top to take off?
So if you're interested in this kind of thing, hopefully you'll check out the link dump, which is also on our appropriately named website.
morningsomewhere.com.
And if you ever want to find us on social, just look for @morningsomewhere on your social media platform of choice, and we'll talk to you there. All right, we'll also be back tomorrow. That does it for us on January 11th. We'll be here to talk to you tomorrow. Hopefully you'll be here as well. Bye, everybody.